I'm Jeff King. I was working on Brains.io, but I actually work at Microsoft, so sorry for the deception. Good morning, everybody. I hope you're not too hungover. That's the clicker. Okay, so Brains.io is a game, all JavaScript based, played in your web browser, at least to begin with. It's really nice, kind of simple game. You get in there and you either are a human or a zombie and you try to turn people either to humans or zombies depending on what you are. It works really well for like multiplayer, which really helped in gaining some traction with it. This is what it looks like today. The journey that I'm going to kind of take you on is more the first 3 months and really kind of how I came to find Brains.io and help out, as well as kind of the journey we had for a few months in trying to meet the demands of the game. So we ended up running with about 3,600 concurrent players. And that took about over 200 cores in 4 data centers across the world. We ran this all on Microsoft Azure for a few reasons. Also, because it's all WebSocket based and there's just a lot of chattiness happening, we were running like 300 terabytes. And that's just data going out, so probably about double that, which is about 100 megabytes sustained throughput from our clusters. This is all in kind of the first 3 months, and it was pretty fun and pretty challenging to meet this in the first 3 months. So this is really kind of before my time. This is before I'd met the founder and writer of the game, Jaeyoon, who I'll get into in a little bit. But this is really his first 2 weeks of growth. And so he had Google Analytics there so we could kind of see what was going on. And just before I met him, he started to see a couple swings up. And this is with absolutely no marketing, a little bit of word of mouth, showing some friends the game. It ended up on Reddit. People started V-blogging it and putting it on YouTube. Things like that were starting to show that there was traction happening in the space. And prior to this, I mean, it's kind of funny. He got a little bit burnt out with his job and went to Thailand for a few months. And he was kind of like, yeah, I just want to write a game. So he sat down for 3 weeks and wrote this game. So the whole engine is based on an open source engine in Node.js. He wrote probably about 1,500 lines of code, really. I mean, there's some HTML and CSS, and his sister designed the assets and things like that. But we're talking like about 1,500 lines of code before actually just putting it out and starting to see like 10,000 users a day come to the site and hit it. So getting into Jaeyoon a little bit. So he's the guy here on the left. So he's an interesting guy. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's probably had about, I think he said about 12 startups, probably including this. Even since Brains now, he's had about 3 other games released in the last like 6 months. So he's a pretty active person. We actually met him. Microsoft is doing hackathons with partners. So we sit down with them and we write code and we help them implement things. So he actually came to us for a product that he's been developing for 5 years, which is like hotel management software. And this is the kind of software that he got a little bit burned out on. So he'd been doing that for about 5 years. And he came to us, and so we helped him with some problems. And it was kind of funny because at the lunch break, he was like, I have this little side project that I'm doing, and all my servers are blowing up. And what do you think about this and that? And that's like really the problem that I got really excited about, because the stuff we were doing here was pretty straightforward, moving a little bit of SQL Server and getting some web pages to render. I mean, I really like to see like servers blowing up because of demand. That makes it a lot more fun for me. So we did this hackathon with him, and it went well. It was based on the other product, but it got me thinking in the back of my mind on how I could help with this game. So first thing, too, just to be clear, once you start running this number of servers, there's definitely some cost involved. The nice thing that I can do, or Microsoft can do, is we can bring money to the table. And so we're able to run all of his infrastructure for him for free. There is obviously cost associated with it, but we run this program called BizSpark, and it's really for startups. And we really like startups that are, growing like this, so we really try to help them out. So we were able to basically fund all the tech side of this project. Which is really helpful when you're an entrepreneur and you're just trying to test things and see what's going to work. And so he had that already in place when we started to actually, like, when his game really started to ramp up, he already had that funding in place, which was really, really lucky. But if you're ever in a situation where you need some, just come and talk to me. So this is really kind of where I truly walked into Brains.io. And I mean, this is a little bit funny, but the idea here being is he had, I think, just over 20 servers. He was using quite large servers at that point, so at least 16 cores or more, so pretty large servers running quite a bit of Node. Primarily when I'm talking about the servers, I'm talking about the Node, like the back-end game engine clusters. The web serving part of it was quite straightforward, but the actual game engine was taking a lot of CPU. So this is what his servers looked like to me. He had like full server crashes, lots of outages. When he was deploying, he'd be deploying onto like multiple websites onto every single box. So in 20 servers, I think he was in 2 or 3 regions, he'd SSH into every single VM and do like git pulls on every single repo that he had on the box. Like, that's how he was doing it, right? But I mean, this was all spawned, you know, over just a couple weeks. So it started with one VM, it was like, yeah, good idea. And then he needed more capacity. He's like, oh, I can do one more. And so when I got in here, he had like, you know, over 20, and deployments and not knowing the version, where is what, it was like, whoo, stay away from it, right? So I walked in, and my first order of business is I mean, I don't like working with VMs, period. I know it's really VMs all the way down, but but just the management was becoming a serious issue. So we kind of started looking at it like, we got to get rid of these VMs, or at least make them way more manageable. So we got together, and it was Vancouver Startup Week, and there was a hackathon going on, so we kind of used that as a weekend. This is about a week after I'd met him. Yeah, it was actually about 3 days after I met him, but that's fine. So we used Vancouver Startup Week to block off some time over the weekend to really get down on the issues. And the first thing we did was sit down and just kind of dreamed up, you know, like, what can we do like radically different? We ended up landing in a fairly similar place to where he had, because the game engine was open source, and we really didn't want to touch the code because it is a very complex piece of code, and we really wanted to, you know, make sure things like it was going to run on Linux, and like just keep it on like the same, as much of the same as we could. But really start opening the door and look at like containerization, and that's really the route that we went. So we ended up, yeah, throwing it onto Docker, doing a quick, over that weekend, really, I'd taken time to learn about Docker, but this is really the first time that I was like stepping up to put it into production and stuff. So, you know, just took time over the weekend, getting it running, testing things, making sure that worked over the weekend. And then we really had to change kind of just one piece of code in the system, and that was when a game engine was coming up, it would actually need to register to show capacity to the users, and that was really the only code change that we truly needed to make to the system. Outside of that, the game engine's quite isolated, which is a good thing in terms of scale, and it's good that there was no state being held anywhere really in the game, so we could just like add as many additional containers with the game engine in there as long as they were self-registering, and that's all we really need to do from the actual dev side. So my role in this overall was really kind of small dev, big ops, while he was really focused on the dev and making sure that the game was awesome and that he was able to continue to add features. So we moved on to Docker because it's cool. Yes. And Docker, or Docker Swarm, Docker's good. I mean, definitely images, and there's a lot of good things about Docker. But I did find quite a few kind of challenges in learning Docker. And just the orchestration of it, I thought there'd be more like magic built into it. I think Kubernetes is doing a much better job at this point, but it worked for what we needed. We ended up doing, or continuing to do, a lot of like, I guess, manual stuff. But we were able to implement, so we had 4, I guess you call them swarms. We had 4 clusters up in 4 data regions. We're moving on to the swarm in about 3 days. After about 5 days, we had completely shifted the environment over to Docker. So this is, yeah, a few days in. We're both excited. You can see we're just command lining everything and have everything now actually running. And even at this point, I mean, we were able to add capacity in a fairly straightforward way that would add like linear scale, which is really what we needed. But even at this point, we still had like lots of crashing in the application and things like that going on. So this was really kind of a first step to really kind of unblock the need to add compute. So I always go back to when I'm talking about scaling. I mean, I think engineers, and I put myself in this bucket, we always talk about, yes, the software is scalable. To me, it's really about the human side, like, are the humans who are behind the systems able to scale the systems in response to like what's going on? So this becomes just super critical. Communication, communication, communication. During this whole process, I mean, looking a little bit forward from where we just were, we started, he had like Discord in place. I don't know if anyone's used this. I think it's kind of used in gaming and stuff. So we started just chatting on Discord. We ended up kind of falling onto Skype all the time because he's just on Skype with his fiance like 24/7. So then him and I would be talking on Skype. It doesn't really matter the channels. The other thing is we would pick up the phone and call each other, which is like in this day and age, pretty unique. And sometimes that would be at 3 a.m. too. So the thing would be though is you need to really communicate what's going on. We were, so I still like, you know, continue to work at Microsoft. He continued to work on the Brains. He like flew to Germany. I was in Africa. We were in different parts in BC, Alberta, wherever, and we were getting all this shit done. It really didn't matter, but the key here is that we were always touching base whenever needed. We kind of got it to a place where like the scale was kind of plateaued and we both could scale it up and down pretty easily, but we'd still be talking behind the scenes about what was going on and what we thought was going to happen. Things like video blogs would come out. So if a video blog came out with like someone with like 1 million followers, we'd need to like talk about that and then think about planning for the next couple days. So I just want to underline like communication, communication, communication. So he had always put Google Analytics in place, and you know, analytics really drives everything that we did. So the Google Analytics, from my perspective, really gave us this. This is all I cared about on the scale side, and this is really how we knew where to put our data centers. You can see there that we're like super hot in Brazil at this point, and that was really done by like one video blogger in Brazil, and then he had hundreds of thousands of followers, and then other people would put videos too. So he was like, it was pretty crazy in Brazil. Comparatively, like North America was way less. And then we saw more and more growth in North America, Europe, and then our other cluster was in Asia at the end of the day. Asia was always relatively small, and Brazil was like always competing with North America, even though you typically see more gamers happening in North America. And so also when I came in and started doing some of this work on the dev side, I was, so this is a Microsoft product called Application Insights, but I was really big on putting telemetry into the application so we could really understand why it was crashing. So we started instrumenting various pieces to get the analytics out of it. And so we ended up with dashboards like this really quickly. This one's really kind of showing the capacity that we're at in our clusters, so just showing overall CPU usage, with the idea being that if we're hitting about 60%, then we start scaling up, right? So that was the big thing to begin with, and then we have some deeper telemetry there. It's really hard to read this stuff. But yeah, just starting to understand how our systems are actually operating became very critical. And then the funness too. So as we started scaling up and getting near like the 200 cores, we really thought that the game might get really big, like Flappy Bird. Flappy Bird it was pretty amazing how big it got. But so we started to provision like hundreds of cores in these regions, and then we started hitting the roadblocks. On Azure, there's just caps that are based on they don't want people to go in there and spin up like 10,000 cores. And not be able to pay for them, basically. So we started support tickets in all of the data centers and saying, like at a minimum, give us like access to 1,000 cores per data center. We never really got to that scale, but we got all that done a little bit ahead of time just to make sure that we had access to as much CPU as we thought we might need. And so this is kind of how it looked in week 3. So we started getting to 100,000 users per day. So this is kind of just like people coming to the site. You can assume that they're playing for, I think the average time is about 3 to 5 minutes they were playing at this point. So 100,000 people coming a day was pretty good in week 3. And because we were just hacking shit all day long, this is really how we ran the business. First off, I mean, I always fall back to like, Excel kind of runs the world. So we were just doing like string building commands to deploy to Docker, to be very straight. Like we just had a page for like Brazil with all the containers we wanted to run, and we would just have pages for each data center. All we do is SSH in, just run commands, just pump those containers out. And this is all we did. And we did this, yeah, for probably like 4 or 5 months. It got automated kind of in the new year. But the auto scale was like humans. That was the auto scale. And the generation of the commands, just to make sure we didn't introduce any issues, was all in Excel. So just to understand when the right time is to like, you know, put effort into that. For us, the focus was primarily on just making sure that we could scale, because we were able to kind of anticipate a lot of it. And then also because it was free, we just over-provisioned a little bit. Free, yes. For me, this was my first time really putting Node.js into production, and Node.js is just so badass. I had no idea. So, like I said, I'm from Microsoft. I'm, you know, primarily a C# developer, but Node is badass. So you probably can't really read these stats. So we had 2 APIs. So I mentioned that we'd have the game engine come online and like self-register. So these are the APIs for the registration. Up here is a get, so that's just people polling to see what servers are available. So we have like 2.5 million requests there with, you know, 15 errors. So I think that's a pretty decent error rate. And, you know, we have like a 3 millisecond response time. So that's just backed by Redis, which is the next point. Redis is badass. These are also run on Azure in like kind of the cheapest, like pretty low levels in terms of like performance and everything too. So these are like both just run on managed servers. And we only had 2 instances for the Node.js stuff, and then the Redis is all managed. And yeah, it was crazy. I mean, these are just things that never gave us any issues in terms of the scale demands that we were trying to meet. And just millions and millions and millions of requests. So weeks 4 to 10, we started to stabilize a bit, as I was kind of alluding to. And so we were able to kind of keep the provisioning correct within the data centers pretty easily. Within there, we'd see some spikes during the day. But overall, it was pretty stable. And, you know, it was at that point that there was kind of some time where they could, and it wasn't even me who started to automate this stuff, but where people kind of came back in and started to automate some of the processes around this. And the other thing that because I was focused on the op piece, it really left Jae-yoon to like really continue to develop the game, which he really needed to do, because he only had developed like 3 weeks before release, and then at the early stage there was only like a month or so where we were dealing with scale. He needed to continue to refine the product and make sure that you know, what the players wanted to do, he was able to kind of add those as features. And yeah, today it's on Android and iOS if you want to download it and play. Yeah, it's a pretty fun game. And so I really give this talk because to me, when I saw what was going on and just the amount of like how empowered we are today, like being able to access these servers and these data centers all around the world is really amazing. And even like I work with a lot of different companies. It was really amazing to see like his idea really be global and so fast. And I really just like, you know, he kind of just sat in a basement for 3 weeks and developed an idea that he'd had that came out of a game that, or a map that he developed in Warcraft like 10 or 15 years ago, like I think Warcraft 2 or something, that he thought was fun. And he came up with this game, and all of a sudden he had like hundreds of thousands of people playing it. And he was able to generate revenue off of it. I think he was like peaking at about $1,500 a day, which is pretty decent, you know, over like 1,500 lines of code. So really, like, it just blows me away that we can do this today. I mean, I just think it's amazing, the industry and the space that we live and work in. And yeah, and today on YouTube, there's over 30,000 like videos of people playing this game, which is pretty crazy. That's a lot of people who have logged in and played and shared it, and that doesn't include like streaming services and stuff. So this is me. If you ever have any scaling issues, you ever want to talk about this, please hit me on Twitter. Always interested. If you're ever interested in Azure or getting some free credits to Azure, let me know. I'd love to help out. Yeah, that's my talk. I don't know if anyone has any questions. Come and find me at the break if you do. Okay, yeah. Shoot, I'll try and repeat it so people can hear. Where is the game state persisted and how do you scale that? So there's no game state. Well, originally there was basically no game state. It lived within the game for the duration of the game. And the games are like minutes, like they're pretty short. He's releasing a beta right now, which the state's stored in a Mongo database. Yeah. But that was the one thing when we met at Vancouver Startup Week. That was like the first thing that, yeah, I was able to look at and we kind of talked about. And we were actually like talking about adding state at that point. And it was like the worst idea that we could have done. So I'm glad we didn't. The only state that we had was in the Redis cache, which was like the server registration. And then everything else is just telemetry coming out of the system. Shoot.
Could you guess at how much it would have cost to run that had you not had access to turn off billing for it, basically?
Yeah. No. It's free. I mean, it was free, but you see bills. The craziest thing at peak, when it was at peak, and I really underestimated, was the bandwidth cost. But we were running like $10,000 to $20,000 a month. Yeah.
Why you didn't start with web app on Azure and you go straight to the Docker?
So the piece, so we had like the actual HTML serving, and then we had the APIs, and those were on an Azure web app or app service. And then the back end is really, everything's like socket driven, so we needed a ton of sockets. And we didn't want to introduce too much change. So the idea of keeping it on a VM, but like just keeping it like not messing around with it too much, really. So that's why we were like, Docker was the smallest step forward that would really enable us to more easily deploy and control the versions. Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with web app.
No, it's not. We talked about like big steps, like Microsoft has a technology like Service Fabric, which you can add state to and things like that. But like the Linux support wasn't GA'd yet, and so we just like stayed away from anything like that. And really, moving to Docker also gave us the ability to move from like 16 core VMs or big VMs down to like, we started with I think 2 core VMs and then decided to kind of run it on 4 core VMs. So that as our stepping function was smaller, our step ups and our step downs were smaller, right? So we made some choices like that, but yeah. We were using ACS, so Azure Container Service. And we had like ARM templates, which are infrastructure as code, so we were able to add and remove from the clusters in, I don't know, 30 or 40 seconds. Yeah, just through like a command line. Shoot.
Is there one thing in this process that you would say, man, I really wish we didn't do that, or would have done differently?
You know, not really. I mean, after a couple months, you're kind of frustrated with like the copy and paste manual stuff, but at the same time, like if you just go to over automate too quickly, then you're probably just going to waste time there. We definitely like hit issues, and you know, we would try things and it wouldn't work, and then we would try another route. The manual processes are kind of frustrating, especially if you're like a software developer, you're always thinking like DevOps terms, but I would prefer like manual, and then like once you know exactly what you want to do, then automate that. And then your testings are all like, you're just wasting that manual time, not the time to implement automated processes that fail. So we didn't have, I mean, I wish I got to them sooner. And still now too, because I'm very focused on like, how would you scale the systems? Like he's running Mongo now, and he's doing it in a way that I'm pretty concerned about because he's about to drop buckets of users. Like right now in the beta site, he has, I don't know, maybe 100 users running it. It's going to be very different if he gets like 3,600 concurrent, and if he has growth on that and it becomes 10,000 concurrent. I mean, I kind of watch what he's doing. I'm like, oh, okay, well, we'll deal with it when we hit it. But he just wants to like write the best game ever. You know, that's his focus, right? And I just want to make sure that people can play it. So I think there's about 10 seconds, so I'll just wrap up here. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day, and then you can find me in the break if you have any other questions. Thanks.